welcome to In Search of the Crystal Skull, an epic adventure into the world of mediocrity. My name is Aaron.
My name is Patricia.
And to celebrate the release of 65, we are going to be going into the Forbidden Temple of Keanu Reeves.
Yes, and also John Wick 4. Keanu Reeves is pretty busy.
Yeah, he definitely is. But to celebrate the fact that Keanu Reeves is going to be our focal point for the next couple of weeks, we are going to be looking at some of his some of his average movies, I guess we could call them. But anyway, we're going to judge them, and then you can judge along with us too. Okay.
Yeah, and the first one that we're going to be taking a look into is an animated film, which you wouldn't think that Keanu Reeves has done animated films, but no, surprisingly, he has done several of them. I mean, we talked about the SpongeBob movie a while back, but we are talking about one that came out at least about a few decades before, in the year 2006, with A Scanner Darkly.
Yeah. So A Scanner Darkly is a 2006 American adult animated psychological science fiction thriller film, say that quickly 3 times, that was directed by Richard Linklater and based on the 1977 model of the same name by Philip K. Dick. The film tells of a story of identity and deception in a near-future dystopia constantly under influence of high-tech police surveillance and in the midst of a drug addiction epidemic. So, I mean, the idea is that America has lost the war on drugs. Substance D is a powerful drug that causes bizarre hallucinations and has swept the country. It's pretty much told at the very beginning of the film that it's making people believe that there's insects crying and calling around and stuff like that, and people are turning into bugs and things like that. Like it has a pretty awful side effect, to say the least.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much told in the delusions of our one of our characters as the credits start to roll through.
Yeah, and also not to mention that it actually splits off the hemispheres of the brains between the left and the right, where the left brain is very analytical, the right brain is very creative. Usually they go in toe together, but what happens if you have them separated and they work individually? That also is a major side effect of Substance D.
Yeah. So basically how it focuses, we got Bob Archor, who is one of the undercover rangers assigned to immerse himself in the drug underworld and infiltrate up to the supply chain. Archor has a vision of being a house with a wife and 2 children in Anaheim, California. Today he has 2 drug-addicted layabout housemates, Luckman and Barris. The 3 spend time taking D and having a complex, possibly paranoid examinations of their experiences. At a police station, Archor maintains the privacy by wearing a so-called scramble suit that constantly changes every appearance of and also his voice. And so he's codenamed in the police force as Fred, while his senior officer Hank has all the undercover officers also wear scramble suits to protect their identities, even from each other. So, I guess that whole thing is quite interesting, to say the least. I mean, scramble suits and, being able to, protect people. And also, it's quite dystopian as well, because apparently not only can they, disguise their identities, but they're being controlled themselves also by their superiors. So they're, cut off from, saying things that, they don't want other people to hear. And then, obviously, they go back to the script and then they're allowed to speak again. So,
exactly, yeah. So it's very controlled, and especially in a time in which everybody has been overwhelmed with drugs, they're trying to be able to find the solution of how they can be able to stop it. And the only way that they can be able to stop it is not by thinking independently, but by following the orders by somebody who's following the orders of somebody else.
Yeah, which you can obviously say they're under the influence of somebody else rather than Substance D. But I digress.
Yeah, exactly. It's very dystopian, very similar to 1984 and various other stories involving with a time in which everybody is being controlled by somebody who's actually being controlled by somebody else. So it's not too much of a surprise. But yeah, in this case, we have this undercover cop Archor who's just trying to find the one who's basically spreading all of these drugs around. And if the 2 people that he is with, Luckman and Barris, if they are the ones who are going to be distributing drugs sometime in the future, and then eventually he starts becoming addicted to the drugs himself, to the point in which he doesn't recognize himself when he's watching the surveillance tapes that is planted all over his house, and he starts not remembering a lot of things. His personality goes into a complete 180 from being sarcastic to being really depressed and just thinking about the consequences of life itself. So yeah, he goes through a lot in this long stretch of the movie, and then to the point in which later on he's just completely overtaken by substance D.
Yeah, this movie really throws you in a loop, doesn't it? Like, it kind of makes you kind of believe, like, what is truth and what is fiction, what is real and what is fake. I would say that even the style of the movie that is presented, I think, is also very good as well, because, like, you don't know whether, like, we call this an animated movie, but I mean, it's kind of like rotoscoped over real life. We're looking
That's exactly
at it.
what it is.
Exactly.
Yes,
It's a blurring of reality. Pretty much into this animated form, and I think even say the animation itself is also kind of sending a message in a way, like the way this movie is doing as well. Now, keep this in mind: I've not read the original thing that this was based off from Philip D. Dick in 1977, so I've not read the novel, so I don't know what I mean. So, but anyway, as we all know, we shouldn't you shouldn't have to read the material before you go see the movie in order to enjoy it. So,
okay, then.
Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the rotoscope animation, because this isn't the first time that Richard Linklater had did this kind of style. He did this in Waking Life in 2001, and then eventually he would do this last year in 2022 with Apollo 10 and a half: A Space Age Childhood, which we have covered in Arun and Patricia, that it was the animated film that was disqualified from the Academy Awards because they felt that it didn't count as an animated film.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, this isn't the first time rotoscope's been used in a movie ever. There was also the original Lord of the Rings as well from back in the 70s. So,
exactly, yeah.
So,
but that was a different type of rotoscope. This is interpolated rotoscope. So it was shot digitally, and then it was used rotoscope, basically tracing the original live action footage and making it into animation to give it that distinct look.
Yeah, and also we've seen the BFG as well. They did the rotoscoping for the RAF Oldham as well for when they were doing all the helicopters and stuff. So rotoscoping is something that we're familiar with, but I have to say I think this is probably the best rotoscoping I think we've seen. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Now, to be fair, I haven't seen any of the other films from Richard Linklater. I haven't seen Apollo 10 and a half. We did talk about this in Arun and Patricia before, but yeah, I mean, we've seen clips of it, and we've seen
let me narrow this down. So I'm saying this in the context of the Roald Dahl retrospective and the In Search of the Crystal Skull and some of the other movies that we've seen.
Gotcha.
In this context, I think we've seen this is probably the best rotoscoping that we've seen in a discussion.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, whereas they only sprinkled rotoscoping in a few shots, this entire movie is rotoscope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it works really well, because with the context of the drugs and with the context of not knowing what's real and what's fake, it really does make things really interesting. But literally the first scene in the movie was when we saw Frick, who's being controlled by all the bugs that are crawling around him, and he thinks that his dog is being obsessed, controlled over with bugs, and so he gives each of them a bath, and so it turns out that it was all in his mind. It was just a side effect of the drugs.
Well, Bob's hallucinations are worse because he sees actually people turning into insects.
Exactly,
that was creepy enough in itself. It's oh god, he's being overtaken by this stuff.
And then again, Frick also has one last hallucinative moment right before he dies, where you have this guy with multiple eyes reading off every single sin he has ever done in his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so...
Yeah, so it goes really far. It makes me wonder about if they decided to do it live action, how would they have done it? But I'm glad that they decided to do the rotoscope
I don't think... Some of the stuff that they end up doing, I don't think would have worked out. Even with CGI, that would have been back in 2006 as well. Good grief. It wouldn't have worked. It would have ended up going off Star Wars-y, if anything, a little bit, which obviously, it's probably alright for Star Wars, but not alright in this context. I think. So I think they did the right thing. I think.
I think they did the right thing too. I mean, it still looks great almost 20 years later.
Yeah, exactly. So, but going through the fact that it's so weird. Fred, quote unquote, is effectively investigating himself.
Yes.
They're even going as far as even though they know the person as Fred, they still don't think that they even talk about Bob being one of the people who they suspect or being part of it. That's how detract they are from it, and it's only until later on in the film that Hank actually realizes that Fred is actually him. And so obviously that all plays into that as well. And then also you got there's another character. I can't remember. I got to be honest with you, everybody. I do apologize. I can't remember if it was either was it Luckman or is it Barris who basically is like telling like the bullshit stories to the police about like them being
Oh, that
terrorists and
was
stuff.
Barris.
That was Barris, yeah. So I mean, I guess Barris is our Jordan Peterson of this movie. I guess like he thinks he knows all the answers, but in actual fact he doesn't. He's actually just full of shit. So
Yeah,
yeah.
he thinks that he has this whole investigation about, blaming Bob, saying that he's an undercover cop and that he quote unquote has evidence, but he doesn't have really that much. And so he claims to be really intelligent. So he's kind of like that person where even though that they're really high up on drugs, that think that they can be able to state everything, even though that they don't necessarily know what they're talking about without concrete evidence. Yeah, so he's that kind of person, while as Luckman is the spastic one. He's the one who's just like panicking and going all over the place. And Frick is just the one who's just like completely gone. He's like completely induced with the drugs.
Yeah, so it's this is not the this is not Pineapple Express by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh, definitely not. This is not played as a comedy. This is like legit. This is supposed to be like a serious take on an anti-drug message.
Yeah,
and another person in the mix is we have Bob's girlfriend Donna, who is obsessed with cocaine and who's just like really checked out a lot of the time. She does have her moments where she is very emotional as well, but at the same time, she seems to be the most level-headed out of everybody.
Yeah, and but then isn't Donna like isn't she's but then at the very end of the movie like she's exposed as like as Hank this entire
Yeah,
time.
she is Hank. Yeah. So
Yeah.
she is also an undercover cop who's trying to catch the people who are involved in the drugs, except that, she's disguised as the superior to Archer and he has no idea who Hank is. He's just the one taking his orders. And then it turns out, nope. It turns out Donna was the one who was behind everything.
Yeah, and then in like at the end of the movie, you can see that she herself has been like really have mixed emotions about like whether they were doing was right, because the whole idea at the very end of the movie, and sorry if we're spoiling this for anybody, but seriously go see it if you're not if you're listening to this already. But the whole setup was that Bob Archor was supposed to get hooked on the drug, and then after that he would go into the New Life program that they suspected this entire time was a cover for like the contributions to Substance D, and so they ended up getting Bob Archor addicted in the first place in a natural environment to put him into this thing, and then be able to hopefully expose, the fact that they've been doing this, which, I don't know if this is a good twist or not, to be honest with you. Like, it's sort of a stupid move. In a way, like, I mean, you couldn't get a double agent to, like, do this, like, naturally. Like, you couldn't get, I mean, keep in mind, like, you have the ability to create, suits that, like, distort, who this person is and hide their identities. You couldn't do that with, like, or, like, come up with some kind of technology to, like, bring in the effects of, being high on Substance D, and then, obviously, be able to pass that off to the New Life program. Like,
well, I think the reason why was because New Path, which is supposed to be a rehabilitation center. Sorry. Yeah, New Path is supposed to be a rehabilitation center for people who are addicted to the drugs. And they are taking advantage of these people by making them work in the camps and having them, basically like get all the, the work done so that they can eventually make the plants, the blue flowers, into Substance D.
Yeah.
So if there was somebody who was like really intelligent, they would have probably snuffed them right away, very similar to in 1984, in which people who were, already catching up into Big Brother's orders would have been heading over to the room immediately, being tortured, and then having their minds like pretty much back into complacency. So I'm sure that they thought, okay, let's just drug him up just enough so that he can be able to retain his memory, and then find out if these people are the ones who are responsible for growing the stuff that eventually becomes Substance D. So yeah, everybody who is in New Path are essentially undercover cops who have been addicted to Substance D, and then eventually they would meet up with each other, and then they would be the ones responsible for saying, okay, this is the company that's done this. But unfortunately, we're at the point in which Bob has become so addicted to it that he becomes complacent and he has no recollections. He's just down to his like minimal, self of survival, where he's known as Bruce, and he has like no memories of anything else.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's, but yeah, so, like, the twist isn't really all that great, to be honest with you. Like, it kind of makes you think, like, they couldn't have done this any better. Like, maybe they were hoping that maybe this would have been successful, and then they would have come up with a sequel. Maybe, I don't know. Like, it kind of feels like it's kind of left off on, like, a point where you think that there'll be another movie after this.
Well,
So
if we remember from the original novel, the whole point of Philip K. Dick writing this in the first place was because it was based off of his own experiences, where after he had divorced from his wife, he went off and he lived in a home that was surrounded by people who were severely addicted to drugs. And this was like his own experiences of seeing those people going through that. I mean, even he was going through this himself when he was writing his novel. And in the end credits of both the book and in the movie, we see a whole bunch of names of a bunch of people who had either succumbed to their drugs or had severe brain damage, and talking about how, this is what happens when, you get addicted to drugs. And this is what happens when, you can't be able to tell the difference between fantasy or reality. And yeah, I think that this was supposed to be kind of like an anti-drug message, which makes a lot of sense because it was the 70s. I mean, this was around the time in which when marijuana, LSD, and cocaine were abundant everywhere.
So, I mean, as an anti-drugs movie, I guess we could say, like, and keep this in mind, like, we've been surrounded by, like, in the 80s and 90s, we pretty much grew up with this stuff, like, don't do drugs, kids. Was a thing, and but I don't think anything has ever hit as hard. I think as A Scanner Darkly. I think we can all
Right.
agree, and so yeah, this is a big thing. One kind of weird thing that really throws you in a loop is that Alex Jones is in this movie.
Yeah,
Like,
that's right. Alex Jones is in this movie, and he plays as a small role who's basically like doing a whole bunch of protests saying that, he knows the secret of, who's the one spreading off substance D, and then he gets arrested and taken by the police.
yeah, it's kind of like it's really weird that he's in this movie, and it's just this, and given that we know what we know about him now, pretty much, yeah. Unfortunately, I think he's. It makes you wonder, like, is he an unnecessary addition, I guess, to this, or will he be edited out of later versions? I don't know, but I think yeah, it was just so jarring to see him. I think in this movie, but I mean, like, but mind you, like, we have other people who are in this as well. So, like, Keanu Reeves obviously is the big headliner in this. Robert Downey Jr. is actually in this as well, which is
Yeah, he's the one who's plays as Barris,
yeah.
and yeah, he's fantastic in this. Woody Harrelson is Luckman, Winona Ryder is Donna, Rory Cochrane is Frick. Yeah, everybody is fantastic in this movie.
And this is an independent movie as well. Like, there's some big names here, pretty much.
Yeah, it is true that it's more of an independent movie, but I think it was done pretty well with the circumstances of the fact that it didn't make its box office numbers. Its budget was $8.7 million, and it only made $7.7 million. So it was a box office bomb.
Yeah, pretty much. But like, it's a mind you, despite that, like, in spite of the ending of the movie, I would say that it is very creative, and it is it has got some great acting in it as well. Like,
Yeah. It's a shame that this movie is overshadowed because I know that when you think Philip K. Dick and movie adaptations, you don't think of A Scanner Darkly. You think of Blade Runner. You think of Total Recall, Minority Report, The Adjustment Bureau. You don't think of A Scanner Darkly. I mean, I don't think anybody would even know about this movie other than, oh, it's that one movie that's animated in rotoscope with Keanu Reeves and Robert Downey Jr. and is directed by the same guy who did School of Rock. So, yeah, I think that this movie has sadly become one of those things that has become obscure over time, and it's a shame, really.
So it's kind of darkly opened in 17 theaters and grossed about $391,000, and also so that's about like $23,000 per average theater. I guess you could say, and so they even got as far as like to work out how much each theater basically took in at that point. So I mean, like, so unfortunately, it didn't make back. It was more than $1 million short of actually earning back its pretty much $9 million budget to make. So, but it was released on DVD and Blu-ray, and so it is available.
Yeah, and you can watch it for free on YouTube.
Yeah. So, well, in America you can, around the rest of the world you can't. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at least it's a few bucks if you want to rent it.
Yeah. So, we pretty much talked about this movie, so I guess we can give it a score. I mean, it's ambitious. I'll definitely tell you that. It's got some great acting in it, and it makes you kind of question, like, your whole existence as the viewer of this movie, and it really makes you think about a lot of things. So, I've got to give it an 8. at least.
Yeah, I'm going to give it an 8 as well. I think that the things that it was trying to do, it was very ambitious. The presentation is very creative and unique. The acting is really, really good. They all are very convincing in their roles. And the story, it's an interesting tale of, an anti-drug message that was based off of a real life event that happened to the creator. So I think that if you are interested in checking it out, I would say do so. I mean, this is definitely a very overlooked movie from Keanu Reeves.
Right, okay then. Well, until the next Keanu Reeves movie in the Forbidden Temple, my name is Aaron.
My name is Patricia.
Take care, and bye for now.
See you later.